Welcome. You've found your way here to a quiet place where stories unfold slowly, like shadows at dusk. Tonight, we're going to drift into something different. Not a nightmare, not quite, but a story with soft edges and a strange warmth beneath the skin. This is a tale about gums, about the mouth, your mouth, and the odd things that sometimes grow there when no one's looking. It begins quietly, like all real horror does, with a dentist visit, a bit of heat, a little swelling. You're safe here, but the story you're about to hear, it might stay with you longer than sleep. So lie back, let your jaw relax, and listen closely, because the next time you feel something pressing beneath your teeth, you might remember this. This is gums. The waiting room smelled like mint and plastic, a sterile artificial calm designed to quiet nerves. Muzak trickled through unseen speakers, muffled by the rustle of magazine pages and the occasional hum of the reception printer. The windows let in a white-grey light, the kind that seemed to flatten everything. It was a Tuesday in late September, unremarkable in every sense. Elliot Thorne sat with his legs crossed, glancing occasionally at the ornate clock above the door. It hadn't moved in the last 10 minutes, which meant it was either broken or someone had forgotten to wind it, if people even still did that. He was 38, an insurance auditor, dressed neatly in an ironed button-down and slacks. His teeth hurt. Not a sharp pain, not quite an ache either, but a warmth that curled behind his gums, especially in the back, around the molars. Beside him, a boy of maybe 10 was hunched in his seat, breathing through his mouth and looking vaguely nauseous. The boy's mother kept whispering assurances and squeezing his hand. Elliot noticed the kid's lower jaw was slightly distended, as though he were chewing something invisible. Across from them, an older man read a newspaper, the real kind, ink-stained fingers and all. A pair of reading glasses sat dangerously close to the tip of his nose. He looked up once, locked eyes with Elliot, and gave a small knowing nod before returning to the news. Elliot uncrossed his legs. The receptionist, a young woman with a face that was both bored and polite, finally called his name. "Mr. Thorne, you're with Dr. Klein today, room 4. He stood, muttered a thanks, and followed the narrow hallway deeper into the clinic. The walls here were bare, clinical. No cheery posters about brushing twice a day. No cartoon molars giving thumbs-ups. It was quiet, too quiet. No drilling, no suction noises. Just the distant sound of a sink running and then shutting off. Room 4 looked just like any other dental room. Leather chair in the centre, the arm extending over it with the bright lamp and tray of sterile tools, and a rolling stool in the corner. He sat down, trying to relax, but there was something subtly off. The air smelled faintly. Earthy. Damp, like soil after rain. The assistant, Anita, according to her name badge, entered with a clipboard. "Good morning. You're here for a cleaning?" "Was supposed to be, but my gums." He hesitated. "I don't know. They feel hot, not sore, just hot." She nodded too quickly. "Okay, Dr. Klein will take a look. He's just finishing up with another patient." She left before he could say more. Left alone, Elliot stared at the instruments. One of the picks had a slight curve at the end, almost like a fishhook. His tongue probed the inside of his mouth. That same warmth again, right behind his back teeth. It wasn't pain. It was like something was incubating. He froze. That wasn't a normal word to think. Incubating. Like eggs. He shook his head and leaned back. The chair was too soft. 10 minutes later, Dr. Klein entered, pushing up the sleeves of his lab coat. He was in his 50s, tall, thinning hair neatly slicked back, and eyes that scanned rather than looked. "Mr. Thorne," he said, smiling without showing his teeth. "Let's have a look." He didn't ask about medical history, didn't mention the cleaning. He just put on gloves and a mask, flicked on the overhead lamp, and gently tilted Elliot's chair back. "Say, Elliot opened his mouth. The examination was quiet, the tools clicking gently against enamel. Then the doctor stopped. No word, no expression, just stillness. He said at last. "Then, how long have you had the warmth?" "Couple weeks, maybe," Elliot said, his voice muffled by fingers and tools. "Getting worse." "No bleeding? No gum recession?" "No." Dr. Klein reached for a small probe, the kind used for measuring gum pockets. He dipped it behind Elliot's second molar on the left. Elliot winced as the tool pressed deeper than expected. 6 millimeters, Klein muttered. "That's unexpected. What's that mean?" It means your gums are hosting something, Klein said. Then he chuckled, shaking his head. No need to worry. I've seen it before. That wasn't reassuring. Klein lowered the chair fully and opened a nearby drawer. Elliot tried to peek, but the angle was wrong. When the doctor turned back, he held a small scalpel. I'm going to make a tiny incision just at the base here. You won't feel a thing. I'll use local anesthetic. What are you? Mr. Thorne, trust me, you'll want this out. Before Elliot could protest, the doctor swabbed something cold onto his gum, then injected a sharp prick. His tongue numbed almost instantly. He wanted to push the doctor's hands away, but his limbs felt heavy, not sedated, just reluctant. Klein's hands moved fast. The incision was clean, surgical. There was a soft sound, like cutting into a grape. Then a pause. Oh, Klein said. He reached for a pair of tweezers. Elliot felt pressure, then the sensation of something being pulled. It wasn't sharp, but deep, anchored. There was a wet snap as it came free. Klein held it up to the light. It was pale, translucent, oval-shaped, the size of a grape tomato, but slightly elongated, with a faint bluish tinge and thin red veins running beneath the surface. An egg. Elliot gagged. What the hell is that? Dr. Klein examined it calmly. Hatched too early. Normally they don't come out until they're ready. They? There are usually more than one. Klein dropped the egg into a steel dish with a soft clink. Let's check the other side. No, I want to go. You don't want to leave it in, trust me. Elliot sat up, saliva dripping from his numb lower lip. What is this? What's growing in my mouth? Klein hesitated. For a moment his mask slipped, not off his face, but in tone. He looked tired. Very, very tired. They're not from here. That's all I know. We started seeing them last year, first in factory towns, then rural clinics, now everywhere. What do you mean, not from here? I don't mean aliens. I mean not from anything we've ever catalogued. Fungal? Parasitic? Some think they're environmental, mutations from exposure, plastic, microchemicals, whatever. But they act like eggs, and they grow, especially in warm tissue. They like the gums, heat, saliva. Elliot stood, dizzy. I want it tested. You can try. Labs won't tell you anything. They always say the same thing. Unidentified organic matter. They get spooked, stop answering calls. I've sent out a dozen samples. Nothing. Elliot backed toward the door. Why haven't I heard about this? Why isn't this on the news? Klein didn't answer at first. He looked down at the metal tray, now holding the single egg. Because by the time you hear about it, it's too late. Elliot left the clinic without paying. Outside, the sky was dull and cloudless. His jaw ached. His tongue was still numb. He kept thinking about the boy in the waiting room, the way his lower jaw jutted out, the glassy look in his eyes. Elliot got in his car, shut the door, and sat there. His hands trembled. He opened the visor mirror, pulled down his lower lip, and stared. The place where the egg had been removed now looked concave, a tiny pit of scarlet, like a nest. And on the other side, on the untouched side, there was a small pale bulge in the gum line. It pulsed once, warm. Elliot Thorne didn't go back to work that day. He didn't even call. He parked in the corner of his apartment building's lot and just sat for a while, keys in the ignition, radio off. The silence inside the car was deafening, his breath fogging faintly on the windshield as a fine invisible drizzle darkened the glass. He could still feel it, the warmth, the small swelling in his right gum line. The other one was gone, extracted by Dr. Klein and left sitting in a steel dish like it was just a bloodied tooth or a piece of tartar. But this other one was still there, pulsing, slight, hidden from the eye maybe, but not from the body. And now that he knew it was there, he couldn't stop thinking about it. He pressed his tongue against it. It didn't hurt. Not really. Just gave. The way a water balloon gives under gentle pressure. He recoiled, then tried again. Same feeling. It flexed. He switched off the engine. His apartment was on the 3rd floor, Unit 3B, facing the back alley with the dumpsters and the skeletal remains of some overgrown bushes that city workers kept forgetting to trim. He stepped into the elevator, past a woman holding a leash with no dog, probably down the hallway somewhere, and gave a tight automatic nod. Once inside, he locked the door, deadbolt and all, and turned on the kitchen light, then the bathroom light, then the bedroom lamp, every light. He poured himself a glass of water but didn't drink it. Instead, he opened the medicine cabinet and stared at himself in the mirror. He didn't look sick. Not in the traditional sense. No fever, no bloodshot eyes, no swelling across his face. Just the mouth. The soft sag in one cheek from the extraction, the invisible egg on the other side, waiting. Egg, he muttered. The word felt ridiculous. He tried cyst instead. That sounded more clinical, more human. But the doctor had used the word egg repeatedly. Elliot tried to shake it off. He took 2 ibuprofen, swallowed them dry, and lay on the couch. But sleep didn't come. Not for hours. That night he dreamed, but it wasn't a dream. It was memory. 2 weeks earlier, maybe 3, he had been brushing his teeth like normal. Something bled a bit, a pink smear on the bristles. He hadn't thought much of it. That happened, right? Overbrushing, wrong angle, too much pressure. Still, it had stung a little more than usual. Then came the warmth. A low-grade heat in his gums, like he'd just sipped hot tea and hadn't noticed burning of his mouth. He'd waited for it to fade, but it hadn't. If anything, it slowly grew. Not painful, just present, insistent, like something had settled in and made itself at home. He should have gone to the dentist earlier, but he hadn't. And now there was the image of that pale bluish sac in the steel tray, veins lacing the surface, soft and wet and delicate, living. Elliot sat upright. The warmth had grown. He stood and returned to the bathroom. The fluorescent light buzzed. He opened his mouth again, tried to hold down his tongue, shine the flashlight from his phone into the back. It wasn't just 1 bump now, 2, maybe 3. They were smaller than the one Klein had removed. Still growing, still nestled, nesting. He dropped the phone. Jesus. The next morning he called the clinic, not to make another appointment, just to ask. Dr. Klein isn't available, the receptionist said. Same bored but polite tone as before. He's out of the office for the week. What? He didn't say anything about that yesterday. I'm sorry, sir. He had to leave unexpectedly. When is he back? I'm not sure. The line went dead. Elliot called back. No answer. He tried to Google the clinic. The site was bare. No information about the staff. No reviews. No option to book online. Just an address and a phone number. He opened the dentist directory for the state. There was no listing for a Dr. Abraham Klein. His stomach twisted. He checked his billing records. The visit was never charged. No invoice, no copay withdrawal, nothing. It was as though the appointment hadn't happened, except for the hole in his gum and the thing still inside his mouth. Elliot skipped work the rest of the week, told HR he had the flu. They didn't press. He was dependable, quiet, a numbers guy, the kind no one noticed unless something went wrong. By Friday, the warmth had grown deeper. He stopped eating solid food. Every time he tried to chew, it felt like pressure, not pain, but displacement. As though the teeth weren't seated correctly anymore, as if something beneath the gums was moving. He began logging the feeling in a notebook. Monday, warmth in gum left side. Pressure 2 tenths. Tuesday, slight bulge right side. Looks like a blister. Wednesday, second bulge. Left side socket collapsed from removal. Still aches. Thursday, 2 more bulges high on upper jaw near molars. Friday, pulse sensation. All 4 quadrants affected. Slight twitch in lip. Heat increasing. He took pictures. In some, you could barely tell. In others, under the right angle, you could see the swellings, like grapes hidden beneath the gum tissue, pressing upward. He posted on a forum, one of those dark corner health ones, where people shared unverified photos and speculated about symptoms no doctor ever took seriously. Until the next morning. A private message. Don't go to a hospital. They'll dismiss it. Look for a black van parked outside medical supply drop-offs. If you see the hummingbird sticker, knock twice and say you've been marked by Klein. They'll know what to do. Elliot stared at it for a long time. He closed the tab, but he didn't delete the message. On Sunday, the skin inside his mouth began to discolour, greyish at the edges. The tissue no longer bled when he prodded it. It felt fibrous, like bark. He spent hours looking at anatomical charts online, trying to understand what was supposed to be there. He wasn't a hypochondriac. He never had been. But now he was afraid to brush too hard, afraid to eat, afraid to even sleep, because at night he could feel them shifting, tiny movements under the skin, not wriggling, just settling deeper. That night he awoke with blood in his mouth. Not a lot, just a smear on his pillow. He rushed to the mirror, toothbrush in hand. One of his bottom molars had turned black at the root. Not decay. There was no rot, no cavity. It looked drained, like something had fed from it. The gum around it pulsed. The egg beneath twitched just once. He dropped the toothbrush, and finally, he screamed. By Monday morning, Elliot had made a decision. He couldn't stay in the apartment. The walls pressed in too tightly. Every mirror was a temptation. Every quiet moment, a chance to probe the inside of his mouth and feel how far things had progressed. The swelling had spread now, no longer localized to just his gums, but climbing slowly into the upper palate. He could feel it when he swallowed, a new awareness, like the topography of his mouth had subtly changed. Worse still, the warmth had deepened. What once felt like a persistent flush now resembled something else entirely. Incubation heat, a term he remembered from middle school science class. The warmth of a bird's breast as it settled into its nest, the slow hatching of something wet and alive. He stood in front of his bathroom mirror, toothbrush in one hand, flashlight in the other. His lips trembled. The swellings were larger now, paler. Their edges more defined, the vascular webbing more pronounced. A thick white string of saliva slid from one corner of his mouth unbidden. His molars were loose, not wobbly, but not solid either, like softened stones set in gum. He hadn't eaten solid food in 2 days. He packed a bag with water, his laptop, and 2 bottles of mouthwash. He didn't know where he was going exactly, just that he couldn't stay there. The notebook went into the bag last. He checked his phone for the anonymous message again. Look for a black van. Hummingbird sticker. Say you've been marked by Klein. He decided to start at the city's central hospital, where the supply vans unloaded daily. If it was a hoax, fine. If not, then maybe someone else knew what was happening. Because Dr. Klein sure as hell wasn't talking anymore. And Elliot was out of time. Outside the hospital, the loading dock buzzed with activity. A long queue of supply vehicles formed an orderly procession, each bearing the logo of a different company. He counted 3 white vans, 2 grey, and finally, 1 black van. No visible logos, just a lone, weathered hummingbird sticker on the rear window. It was faded, like it had been peeled and reapplied several times. Elliot's heart thumped. He waited until the driver, a man in his 40s, dressed in scrubs but wearing dark sunglasses, returned to the cab. Elliot approached, careful not to appear frantic. The man rolled the window down halfway. "Can I help you?" Elliot hesitated, then said quietly, "I've been marked by Klein." The man's face didn't change. He stared, silent for a beat too long. Then he reached over, unlocked the passenger door and said, "Get in." Elliot slid in. The interior smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee. There were no clipboards, no labelled boxes, just a long black duffel in the back seat, unzipped, filled with metal instruments he didn't recognize. They drove without speaking for several blocks, turning off the main road and into a quiet industrial corridor near the edge of the city. Warehouses with no signage, no pedestrians, no cameras. The driver pulled into a fenced lot behind one of the buildings, parked, and turned off the ignition. "You need to keep your head still," he said calmly. "If you flinch, I might rupture the wall." "What wall?" The man turned, his sunglasses still on. "You'll see." Inside the warehouse was a single chair beneath a construction light. No medical tables, no sterilization gear. Just a mobile cart with a roll of gauze, a box of latex gloves, a vial of lidocaine, and a long pair of forceps. "Sit," the man said. Elliot did. The man opened his own bag, pulling out a thin rod with a hooked camera on the end, like a USB endoscope. He plugged it into a small tablet and wrapped a cord around Elliot's neck to stabilize the feed. "Open." Elliot complied. The camera slid past his teeth, deep into the back of his mouth. The man adjusted the focus, and then paused. On the screen, Elliot saw the roof of his mouth, but it looked foreign. The upper palate had split slightly, a fissure now running across the soft tissue, puckered at the edges, and inside the gum line, clusters. Rows of sac-like bulges, translucent and breathing, almost rhythmic. The man froze the frame. "There are 6, he said flatly. 4 are viable, 2 have collapsed." "Collapsed?" "Dead but still nested. They'll rot if we don't get them out." "Rot? Think of them like teeth. Dead ones become septic, spread to the bone." Elliot felt sweat pouring down his back. "What are they?" The man peeled off his gloves, sat on a nearby crate, and looked at Elliot without expression. "We think they're reproductive. Not just parasitic. They incubate inside the gums because of the warmth. Salivary enzymes activate some kind of gestation cycle. Then once they've reached maturity..." He stopped. Elliot's voice cracked. Once they mature, what? They emerge. From the mouth? Not always. The silence that followed stretched too long. Are they alive? Elliot asked finally. Are they aware? The man didn't answer. Instead, he stood, pulled a new pair of gloves on and said, Tilt your head. I'm going to numb the area. The extraction took 20 minutes. Each egg was pulled using curved forceps after a micro-slit was made in the gum line. Elliot bled less than expected. The man muttered something about vascular rerouting, but Elliot was too numb, physically and mentally, to respond. The things were pale as before, but slightly firmer now, more defined. One twitched as it was placed on the tray. Still viable, the man said. Then what? You throw them out? The man stared at the tray. We incinerate the dead ones. Elliot swallowed thickly. What about the live ones? The man didn't answer. Afterward, Elliot sat in the back of the van, pressing gauze to his mouth, watching the city drift by as they returned. The man didn't say another word. As they pulled up a block away from Elliot's apartment, the man finally spoke. They'll come back. What? The eggs. They always do, unless you isolate. No kissing, no shared utensils, no contact with open fluids. Elliot blinked. You mean it's contagious? The man opened the door. It's cultural. And then he drove away. That night, Elliot lay in bed, the gauze in his mouth soaked red. The warmth had ebbed slightly, but a phantom pressure remained, like the body knew something had been removed and was preparing to compensate. He couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, wide-eyed, trying to understand. Not from here. Not a bacteria. Not a fungus. A cycle. Like nature had written a new rule book, and someone, somewhere, had found a way to seed it in people's mouths. He thought of all the things we put in our mouths every day. The gum, the straws, the tongue depressors at clinics, the free samples at grocery stores, the water fountains, the plastic lids on takeout cups, the small moments we don't even register, things we learn to ignore. He stood slowly and went to the mirror one last time, pulled down his lower lip. In the crevice beside his canine tooth, a new swelling, tiny, almost invisible, but warm. Chapter 4. The Whisper of Teeth. Elliot stopped talking to people, not out of fear, not entirely. It was more preemptive. He ignored texts, screened every call, let emails pile up until the red notification bubble climbed into the triple digits. Friends started with concern, then faded to silence. Even HR only sent one follow-up about his prolonged absence before leaving it alone. By Thursday, the mirror in his bathroom was covered with a sheet of cardboard. He didn't need to look anymore. He could feel everything. The new swellings had returned faster than before. 2 on the lower jaw, nestled neatly near the rear molars, and 1 forming high on the roof of his mouth again, like a bloom trying to press through stone. The warmth hadn't left. It had spread, subtle as a fever, a damp heat that made sleeping impossible and chewing unbearable. He lived on cold water and broth now. He didn't dare open his mouth more than necessary, not in public, not even to himself. Because something had changed. The eggs had grown faster, yes, but it wasn't just the speed. It was the way they moved. They shifted. When he tilted his head, when he swallowed, when he clenched his jaw too long. Not just passive growth, not just heat-seeking sacs. They reacted, they responded. That night Elliot sat in the dark, lit only by the glow of his laptop screen, and opened a new search window. He typed slowly. Dr. Abraham Klein, missing dentist. Black egg oral infection, dental nesting parasite. Nothing. Same results, same dead ends, except for one obscure link buried 5 pages in, a .pdf from a dental journal with a cover dated 2023. The title was bland, Emerging Patterns in Gingival Abnormalities in Post-Industrial Populations. But the author caught his eye. A. Klein, DDS. He clicked. The article was dry, academic, filled with unhelpful phrases like non-biological inflammatory matrices and suspected salivary activation of keratinous pseudocysts. But one paragraph near the end had been highlighted, possibly by another reader. Open quote. Recent discoveries suggest the existence of self-replicating organic units that appear to rely on oral heat and fluid cycles for activation. These units exhibit embryonic characteristics, including pulsed vascular mimicry and internal structure resembling primitive blastocysts. The ethical implications of their removal remain undetermined. Close quote. Elliot read the paragraph 5 times. Then he emailed the address listed in the author's footer. Subject: "They're back." Message: open quote, "I'm not a doctor. I saw you. You took one out. They're growing again. I need to know what they are. Please respond. E.T. close quote. He hit send. Nothing bounced back. No out of office. No mailer daemon. Just silence. He woke at 3:12 a.m. with a taste in his mouth like burnt plastic. His lips were sticky with saliva and his head throbbed. He sat upright and felt something shift inside his cheek. Not a twitch, a drag, as though something inside had rolled from one side of his mouth to the other. He ran to the bathroom, forgot the cardboard, ripped it down, and opened his mouth. The lower gums had split just slightly, like old leather tearing at a seam. The egg there had grown larger than any before it. Its surface was veined, opaque, almost dull white. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that it was vibrating. A low, rapid tremor that rippled across the surface in irregular pulses, like a creature shivering in its sleep. He gagged, his eyes stung, his knees hit the floor. And then he heard it, a sound from inside his own mouth. Not a voice, not quite. More like clicking, soft, subtle, like teeth gently tapping together behind his jaw, but with no cause. A rhythmic pattern, like code. Morse? He clamped his hand over his mouth and crawled away from the mirror. He didn't sleep again. Instead, he began to record the sounds. At 4:23 a.m., he used a voice memo app on his phone and pressed it close to his cheek. The recording lasted 2 minutes. He played it back. Static. A hum. Then click, 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 click. He replayed it 20 times, then began transcribing the pattern into dots and dashes. It didn't form real Morse code, but it wasn't random either. Too consistent, too deliberate. He opened an old spreadsheet from work and began tracking timestamps, frequency, pulse intervals. He made 6 columns, one for each location he remembered having a swelling. By dawn, all 6 were active, each with a unique rhythm, each one clicking at different intervals like they were taking turns or talking. By the weekend, Elliot couldn't speak properly anymore. His tongue was stiff. The roof of his mouth had softened, like tissue paper dampened with spit. The new eggs, at least 9 now, were visible without light. The clicking never stopped. It happened even when he wasn't moving, even when he held his breath. They were communicating. Not with him, with each other. And maybe not just inside him. Because when he stood by the window one night, watching the streetlights flicker below, he saw a woman across the street, standing at her window too. Motionless, hands at her side, mouth slightly open, she stared into nothing, and her jaw was clicking. He began to notice them everywhere. In line at the pharmacy, an older man with a dry cough and lips chewed raw. A delivery driver chewing gum so hard it bled. A child in a stroller gnawing his finger while his mother typed into her phone. The clicking wasn't always audible, but the signs were there. Jaw stiffness, glassy eyes, mouths held slightly ajar like they were swollen from dental work. He passed a man on the train who turned slightly to him and said, without preamble, "You shouldn't have removed them. They remember." Elliot didn't ride the train again. By Sunday, he began to feel pressure against the base of his skull. Not pain, but an expanding awareness, a sense that something was pushing outward, that his mouth was no longer just a passage, it was becoming a chamber, a place designed for hatching. His gums no longer bled, his teeth were no longer his. They felt borrowed, a mask of enamel holding back what came next. He opened his notebook, wrote the final entry, open quote, "They are not parasites, they are embryos. We are the cocoon, we are what they shed." Close quote. Then he closed it and waited, because the heat in his mouth had become unbearable, and something inside was almost ready. The last tooth fell out on a Wednesday. Elliot didn't cry when it happened. He didn't gasp or panic. He simply sat on the edge of his bed with his mouth slack and bleeding quietly, holding the small pearl-coloured thing in the centre of his palm. The root was black, hollow. The surface had gone translucent, like frosted glass worn thin from the inside. He set it on the nightstand and didn't look at it again. His gums no longer felt like gums. They were soft, wet cradles now, thick with warmth, pulsing with their own rhythm. He could feel every twitch, every coil and uncoil, like something stretching against the skin from the inside. Not to escape. Not yet. Just preparing. He hadn't left his apartment in nearly 2 weeks. There were bowls of untouched broth lined up along the counter. He could no longer swallow without pain. His throat felt lined with velvet, overgrown and fragile. His lips barely closed anymore. He slept with a towel pressed beneath his chin to catch the saliva. At first the clicking had kept him company, little syncopated signals rising from his own jaw and echoing faintly through the walls, down the plumbing, through the vents. Other mouths, other hosts. They had comforted him in a way nothing else could, but now even those voices had gone silent. He wasn't sure if that was better or worse. The quiet made him feel abandoned, or worse, watched. The things inside him were not dormant, they were focused, silent only in the way a predator stills just before it lunges. They didn't need his cooperation anymore, only his body. The man in the black van had called them reproductive. Klein had said they weren't from here. But neither of them had told him the truth, not the full truth. Elliot now understood something both of them had been afraid to say aloud. They weren't invaders. They were descendants. This wasn't infection. This was inheritance. That night he tried to speak for the first time in days. Just one word. Help. It came out as a wet hiss. His tongue didn't lift right. The sound barely cleared his lips. His throat had changed. The vocal cords felt muffled, like wrapped in gauze. Whatever lived inside him now, nested in the gaps where teeth used to be, it didn't want him using the voice he used to have. It wanted quiet. It wanted to prepare. He lay on the couch, body curled, mouth slightly open, the heat rising steadily through his skull, not feverish, not snits, fertile. The thought made him shudder. But it was true. He wasn't dying, he was ripening, and they were almost ready. It began without ceremony. No great spasm, no scream, just a loosening. The roof of his mouth parted first, soft tissue stretching open like a flower. He gagged as the split widened, but no blood came. The tissue folded back, obedient. Below it, he felt the sacs detach one by one, slipping downward, sliding over his tongue. They weren't heavy, not at all. They were elegant. One dropped onto the carpet, silent as a drip of water. Then another, then three at once. Elliot couldn't move. Not out of paralysis, out of willingness. He had become the path. Not the parent, the exit. He watched, unfocused, as they assembled at the base of the couch, tiny, delicate things no longer veiled in sac or fluid, pale limbs, translucent wings folded tight against their backs, eyes black as seeds. They didn't look up at him. They didn't need to. He was already spent, emptied. They scattered, quiet, intent. Some into vents, some beneath the door, some toward the kitchen sink where the drain gurgled softly, as if calling them home. He stayed like that until morning. His mouth remained open, jaw loose, tongue dry and numb. No more twitching, no more warmth, just stillness. Like something sacred had passed through him and left nothing behind but silence. When the sun crept through the towel-covered window, he finally stood. Every part of his body ached with vacancy. He walked to the bathroom and faced the mirror for the first time in days. What stared back was not monstrous. It was just less. His gums were stripped smooth. His teeth were gone, but the holes had already sealed over, pink and tender. He was no longer capable of speech, and for some reason that didn't frighten him. Later that afternoon, while sitting by the window, he watched a woman across the street pause at her mailbox. She tilted her head, pressed a hand to her cheek, and then she frowned, winced slightly, and pulled her phone out to schedule a dentist appointment. She didn't know what it was yet. Just some irritation, a little swelling, something in the gums, probably nothing. It would go away on its own. She turned and walked back inside, and somewhere deep in the silence, Elliot swore he could hear it. Click. And now you know. Not everything that grows inside us is ours. Not every warmth is welcome. Sometimes the things we dismiss, the tiny aches, the pulsing gums, the little clicks we hear in the quiet, are warnings. Or maybe introductions. You've made it to the end of gums, but something tells me you'll be thinking about your mouth just a little more tonight. If you enjoyed sinking into this sleep story and want more dark whispers before bed, go ahead and follow, subscribe, or just come back tomorrow night. We'll keep the lights low for you.